They were driving a research vehicle across the Antarctic ice. Suddenly, a strange rhythmic signal came through the radio. The researchers quickly stopped the vehicle, preparing to listen carefully to the signal, but the ice beneath their feet suddenly cracked. Fortunately, the gap below was extremely narrow, trapping the vehicle and saving their lives. When they turned on the searchlights, they froze in place, discovering that beneath them was an alien spacecraft. Even more astonishingly, not far from there in the ice, an unknown lifeform was frozen. The scientists examined the findings carefully. They realized the ship and the unknown creature had been here for hundreds of thousands of years. Whatever was frozen inside, it didn't matter. This discovery could make them unimaginably wealthy. Excited, they called in a crane to cut the entire ice block and bring it back to the base. They had no idea that a disaster was about to strike. Back at the base, they used tools to drill into the ice block and successfully obtained a tissue sample. That evening, at a party celebrating the discovery, Sander realized from the extracted tissue that it did not belong to Earth. As long as they could bring this alien creature back, they would become heroes written into the history of science. The allure of glory, wealth, and the title of discoverer stimulated everyone's nerves, and the party instantly became frenzied. Meanwhile, Jameson had just stepped out of the restroom. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound coming from behind him. He followed the sound into the warehouse. To his shock, it was coming from the ice block containing the creature. He bent down to carefully examine the surface of the ice block, but suddenly behind him he heard a teammate's terrified scream. Jameson was startled by his mischievous companion, which caused him to momentarily ignore the anomaly he had just discovered. As he turned to leave, the ice block suddenly exploded, and the creature inside vanished instantly. Terrified, Jameson fled back to the party, babbling incoherently about the creature's disappearance. They didn't really believe a creature frozen for hundreds of thousands of years could come back to life, but they still rushed toward the warehouse. Seeing the hollowed-out ice trough and the snow falling from above, they finally realized the seriousness of the situation. They immediately split into 3 groups to search the base. Adam and his companion arrived at the kennel, only to find the floor covered in blood. Elsewhere, Henrik and another teammate suddenly heard chewing sounds. They cautiously crouched to examine a gap, and unexpectedly saw the creature. Henrik hurriedly turned around to call for the others, but a tentacle suddenly pierced his body. He screamed while grabbing a wooden post in a desperate struggle, but was gradually dragged into the abyss. By the time the others reached the scene, only a shaken Olav remained, accompanied by disgusting chewing sounds from the darkness. They fired into the darkness in terror, but couldn't even damage the creature's skin, which completely enraged it. At the critical moment, Jameson threw 2 barrels of gasoline and then hurled a flare. The flames erupted instantly, dragging the creature into a raging fire. Its screams continued for tens of seconds before it finally went completely still. At that moment, everyone no longer had any desire to celebrate, and the base was filled with suffocating fear. Sander, however, was thrilled. He said this was their first contact with an alien, and insisted on dissecting the creature immediately. They moved the creature onto the operating table, and Sander and Kate began their research on it. When they opened the creature's body, they were shocked to find Henrik wrapped in a membrane inside. His body was connected with many newly grown tissues linked to the creature, as if they had already fused into one. As their research went deeper, Kate made an unexpected discovery. Inside the creature, she found the metal plate that had been implanted in Henrik's arm after his fracture. If the creature and Henrik had already fused, why was this metal plate left completely untouched? All of this was answered after she extracted the tissue sample. Although the creature had lost all breath, its cells were capable of consuming human cells, and then perfectly replicating them. The discovery sent chills down everyone present. They had no idea what the creature would evolve into. The next day, because Olav was still in shock, 2 pilots decided to take him to a nearby hospital for treatment. Just as the plane took off, Kate discovered a horrifying clue in the bathroom: blood-stained pebbles scattered across the floor. She carefully picked up the pebbles with a tissue and realized they were actually dental fillings. Strange bloodstains also appeared on the shower curtain nearby. Kate hurriedly pulled it aside and found it covered in blood. Clearly, something had infiltrated their group. Kate ran out of the room, wildly waving at the helicopter to signal it to land. Luckily, since the helicopter had just taken off, Kater noticed Kate waving her arms on the ground and decided to land to check. At that moment, Olav, terrified inside the cabin, suddenly screamed, and the pilot opposite him began to have his face twist grotesquely. In the next few seconds, his body warped instantly, transforming him into a terrifying monster. The helicopter shook violently, and then went out of control, crashing toward a distant snow-covered mountain. Kate realized it was too late. Back at the base, Colin tried to call for help via radio, only to find the communication system had somehow failed. Worse still, an unprecedented blizzard was approaching, trapping them completely at the base. Amid the chaos, Kate realized that if the creature could disguise itself, there might still be one hiding among them. She rushed into the bathroom looking for evidence, but found the floor had been cleaned spotless. Clearly, the hidden creature had erased all traces, and was even disguising itself among the group, watching them. At that moment, Sander and Edvard were arguing about going out to search, and Kate hurriedly stopped them, saying they couldn't leave for now. The creature could perfectly replicate killed humans, and the cleaned bathroom confirmed that there was at least one monster among them. Luckily, it couldn't replicate inorganic objects. Kate showed the dental fillings as proof, but everyone doubted her. Ignoring Kate's discovery, they turned and left the room, preparing to search for the 4 people from the crash. At that moment, Juliet quietly told Kate that she suspected Colin was the hidden creature. She had seen him during the crash walking out of the bathroom carrying something. Thinking about the companions about to leave with Colin, Kate's heart sank. Juliet then suggested they could disable the vehicles to stop them, and she happened to know where the keys were kept. She led Kate to the storage room to find the keys. Just as Kate bent down to search, disaster struck. Behind her, Juliet suddenly transformed into a monster, revealing tentacles and claws. She was the real creature hiding in the base. Seeing the monster rushing at her, Kate quickly knocked over a nearby shelf to dodge. She then dodged the monster's attacks between the shelves in the warehouse, using all her strength to break out of the room. Carl, lured by the noise, hadn't reacted in time, and was impaled in the chest by the monster that burst out. Luckily, Lars arrived with a flamethrower. The moment Kate opened the door, countless flames engulfed the monster completely. Once the monster finally lost its breath, they burned the bodies of both the creature and Carl in the snow. The monster's corpse and Carl's death finally made everyone believe Kate. They hurriedly insisted on leaving immediately, but the creature could replicate, disguise, and lie in wait. Even a single mistake could be enough to destroy the entire world. Faced with a creature that spread like a virus, they knew exactly what had to be done. They had to isolate it and destroy it completely. By placing uncontaminated blood next to the creature's tissue cells, they could identify the real monster. To prevent the creature from escaping the base, Kate and Lars disabled the ignition of all the vehicles. Then Lars called Kate into a corner where a full crate of grenades was hidden, possibly their last resort plan. At that moment, Edvard suddenly appeared behind them. Unable to tell each other's allegiance, the two tacitly hid the weapons. As the 3 returned to the base together, Kater and Jameson from the crash arrived, covered in snow. Although their appearance was pitiful, it would have been impossible for anyone to survive the crash under normal circumstances. To be safe, they temporarily locked the 2 in the storage room, planning to wait for test results before deciding what to do. But when the 2 emerged, they discovered that a nearby laboratory was on fire. Although they rushed to extinguish the flames in time, everything inside the lab had already been destroyed. Clearly, the monster among them did not want to reveal itself, and for a while everyone began to suspect their companions. Sander and Adam started accusing each other, and as the tension escalated, Kate suddenly said there was a way to tell them apart. The creature could only replicate cells. It couldn't copy inorganic objects inside the body. By checking each person, they could identify the imposters. She asked Peter for a flashlight and then examined everyone's teeth one by one. If someone had dental work, it meant they were human. Although this method identified some humans, it upset others who didn't want to be categorized as monsters. For the sake of the majority's safety, Kate ignored their complaints and split everyone into 2 groups. She then sent Jonas and Lars to bring the imprisoned Kater and Jameson over, so they could identify their allegiances. But when they arrived at the storage room, it was empty. Only the damaged floor remained in the corner. Lars immediately concluded the other must be the hidden monster, and rushed outside to find them. As he opened a warehouse door, it was as if something dragged him inside. Jonas froze in terror and hurried back to the cabin to tell everyone what had happened. The shocking news immediately rattled the group, which had just calmed down, and they started blaming each other again. Then a shattering glass sound interrupted the argument. Clearly something had broken in. The group followed Peter down the hallway and ran into Kater and the other who had escaped. Seeing Kater's flamethrower, Peter excitedly asked about Lars's whereabouts. Seeing Peter lose control, Kater shouted for him to put down the weapon, but Edvard demanded Peter shoot. In the chaos, Peter charged forward but was knocked down by Jameson, who had fired first. Hearing silence in the hallway, Edvard cautiously peeked out and discovered the flamethrower's fuel was leaking. When everyone came to, Edvard was knocked unconscious by the blast wave. To prove he wasn't a monster, Kater had the others help Edvard to the recreation room before deciding what to do next. But as they helped Edvard back to the room, disaster struck again. Edvard suddenly began to mutate. His arm twitched violently and sprouted tentacles that lunged at Jonas. Jonas screamed and struggled desperately, but the arm clung to his face like a leech. Everyone froze in horror at the sudden transformation, an endless chill enveloping them. Before anyone could react, Edvard mutated again, and a long tentacle appeared before them. Screams erupted as they frantically urged Cater to use the flamethrower, but it jammed at that moment. They could only watch as the tentacle thrashed wildly, leaving the room in chaos within seconds. Adam tried to reach the door but was impaled by the tentacle, leaving only a pitiful scream. The others took cover behind a pool table, but one strike from the monster shattered it instantly. Jameson fired wildly, but the bullets did nothing to the monster, and the tentacle pierced his chest. Realizing only fire could stop it, Kate and Cater hurriedly repaired the flamethrower. At that moment, Edvard fully mutated into a spider-like monster and targeted the screaming Adam nearby. Its body clung to Adam, and despite his frantic struggles, the monster stuck to him like glue. By the time Kate fixed the flamethrower and rushed over, the fused monster had already disappeared. Amid the terrifying silence, Kate turned and saw Jonas had already fused with the monster. Though his eyes were filled with fear and pleading, Kate gritted her teeth and pulled the trigger. Nearby, the injured Jameson also died, and to prevent him from mutating, Kate tearfully destroyed his body. To completely destroy the creature, Kate and Cater began searching the base for its traces. Meanwhile, the man hiding in the control room was knocked down by the fused monster, his screams echoing through the entire base. The two rushed toward the sound and unexpectedly encountered the monster that had formed from the man's arm. Cater swung an axe viciously, but before they could relax, it grew tentacles out of thin air and reattached itself. It wasn't until Kate used the flamethrower for a full 2 minutes that the monster finally stopped struggling. They then found a records room and immediately split up to search, but the fused monster suddenly lunged at Cater. Screaming, Cater bolted and, in his panic, hid inside a warehouse, clutching a nearby knife tightly. The monster quickly tracked him down and began searching the room, and Cater barely dared to breathe, curling up behind a shelf. Eventually, the monster spotted him, roaring as it charged forward. At the critical moment, Kate appeared and activated the flamethrower against the monster. The flames forced the monster out of the building, and before it could escape the fire, Kate pressed the flames down on it again. It wasn't until the monster was completely charred that they finally breathed a sigh of relief, but their despair was far from over. They suddenly noticed Sander driving away from the base, and it was clear he had already been infected. Cater realized that in this blizzard, Sander wouldn't survive until morning. But if Sander survived, it could trigger a world-ending disaster, so the two chased after him to stop him. When they caught up to him, only an empty vehicle remained in the snow. Realizing he might have entered the alien ship, Kate and Cater didn't hesitate and went after him. After passing through a long corridor, they finally reached the top of the ship, where the entrance above was already open. Kate quickly guided Cater over, but at that moment the ship's engines started up. The top deck surged toward them like a rolling wave. Despite running with all their might, Kate accidentally fell into a gap in the deck. When she awoke again, Kate was inside the ship, holding up an oil lamp as she carefully explored her surroundings. It was then that she realized the ship's engine was powered by a strange beam of light. She cautiously approached to observe, but a strange sound suddenly came from behind her. Turning around, she saw Sander had mutated into a monster. One swipe sent her flying and a grenade fell from her body. The monster roared as it chased Kate, who hurried into a narrow nearby tunnel. Fortunately, the tunnel was so tight that the monster got stuck at the entrance, only able to reach out its tentacles to search. Kate desperately climbed forward but was blocked by a special panel. At the critical moment, she spotted the lost grenade not far on the other side. She held her breath and carefully moved toward the grenade the moment the monster retracted its tentacles. As she gritted her teeth to leap, a stone above was smashed by the monster. Kate didn't hesitate and lunged to grab the grenade. Unfortunately, the monster's tentacle grabbed her legs and began dragging her out. At the last moment, Kate pulled the pin and hurled the grenade into the monster's mouth. Cater arrived with the flamethrower, and Kate immediately got up, leading him into a nearby tunnel. After a massive explosion, the ship's engine was destroyed, the monster's roar ceased, and they successfully escaped. After surviving the ordeal and unable to return to the base, Cater suggested heading to a Russian research station 50 kilometers away. They reached the parked vehicle, ready to drive, but Kate suddenly realized something was wrong. She lied that she had put the flamethrower in the trunk, but after getting out, she secretly carried it on her. Then she told Cater how she had confirmed he was human. The earring on his left ear, an inorganic object the monster couldn't replicate. Cater's expression changed instantly. He instinctively touched his right ear, revealing his true identity. Without hesitation, Kate activated the flamethrower, filling the entire vehicle with flames. The monster's agonized screams echoed across the empty snow, confirming her suspicions. Kate approached another vehicle, opened the door, and suddenly froze in place. The next day, a helicopter landed at the burnt-out base. Seeing the horrifying scene, he hurriedly called out, searching for survivors. At that moment, bullets hit the ground near him, as Lars emerged holding a sniper rifle. He excitedly demanded the other open their mouth to verify identity, but the dead sled dog suddenly ran out instead. After confirming the pilot wasn't infected, He had him fly the helicopter to chase it, attempting to kill the sled dog on the spot. But amidst the flying bullets, the sled dog remained completely calm. Its prey was never these humans, but the research station not far away. As Lars pulled the trigger, the screen abruptly cut to black. This Antarctic horror was both the prequel's conclusion and the beginning of the entire Thing story. The alien creature beneath the ice was never eradicated, constantly lurking around humanity. The true despair had only just begun.